Welcome, everyone, to the Age Backwards Summit 2025. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Carlos Reyes. Carlos, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. I'm very happy to be here today with you.
And why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the health and wellness industry?
Sure. Well, my name is Carlos Reyes, and I'm a health coach. I just celebrated my 35th anniversary in the health and fitness industry. I started out as a sales associate at Bally's Jack Lane 35 years ago, and I discovered that I wasn't very good at sales, but I was really good at interpersonal skills. I had really good interpersonal skills, and I loved working with people face to face, one on one. And so I transferred to the personal training department. As my business grew and I got to experience working with different populations, different demographics, people with special injuries and needs, I discovered that I was really good at working people out, but I needed more experience and expertise working with people. And so I got my health coach certification from Well Coaches Corporation in 2009. So I've been a health coach for about 15 years. And I currently work with the over 50 population here in the New York City area, both virtually and in person.
What made you want to work with the over 50 population?
It wasn't a conscious decision, actually. I've been lucky that I've established long-term relationships with many of my clients, some for multiple decades. So I've been working with my clients, some of my clients, since they were in their late 20s, early 30s, and we've continued to work together. One of my long-term clients just turned 61. And so it was just a natural progression. So I didn't decide to work with the over 50 population. It just turned out that way. I love working with the over 50 population, because it's more of an intrinsic, way to work with people, because what you're doing, or most of the people that come to me, what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve their lives, try to improve their daily lives. And it's not so much about the extrinsic physical aspect of working out or exercise. Just to give you an example, one of my clients who I've been working with for almost 8 years now came to me at the age of 70. He had just turned 70, and his wife was pleading with him that she was getting tired of getting down on her knees to tie his shoes. He had lost the ability to forward flex and tie his own shoes. And so he came to me. He just celebrated his 70th birthday. And we've been working together for 8 years now. Now he can tie his shoes. That led to, I want to be able to take a bath without any help. So I want to be able to get into the bathtub and out of the bathtub without getting any help. We've accomplished that. His granddaughter his youngest granddaughter was born during the pandemic. She's in Australia. He's here in the States. He hadn't met her. But one of his goals was, when he did eventually meet her, he wanted to be able to get down on the ground without any help and play with her. And so you can see how the progression from him not being able to tie his shoes and then being able to tie his shoes, getting in and out of the bath without any assistance, getting down on the floor to play with his 2-year-old granddaughter, how that transition can just in a almost invaluable way help someone improve their quality of life. And that's why I love working with the 50 population, because they take those golden nuggets. I call them golden nuggets. They take those golden nuggets and they hold on to them, because they know that those are the things that are really important. And those are the things that are going to help them to continue to be productive into their 60s, 70s, 80s. And my oldest current client is 93.
93?
93. Yeah. And her main goal, number one goal, is to stay out of a wheelchair. And so we've been successful at that. I hope to be successful until, She's no longer around, but yeah, she's great. I love working with her.
I find that interesting that a 70-year-old came to you was unable to tie their shoelaces because I just turned 70
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I'm still 40.
Well, that's a great example, right? So this person was never comfortable in their body. They're tall, uh, and they were the tallest um, member of their sort of class, right, in their adolescence, and so they were teased very often when they were younger. And so they never got comfortable in their bodies, never athletic, never. And so they didn't, that sort of mind body connection, that body awareness was never instilled in them. They never learned that until it got to a point where they couldn't do something as simple as tying their shoes, which we take for granted, right? You feel 40, you can tie your shoes, you can tie your sneakers. You don't need those new sneakers that, you don't have to untie and tie and slip right on. Because you can still tie your shoes. But yeah, it was, it's just a great example of the things that those of us who are physical, right? I've been exercising since I was a kid. I grew up in a low income household. And so my mother always encouraged me to go out and play. Um, I swam, I ran track, I did martial arts, but I could never, I was never a team sports player. I couldn't afford the uniform. I didn't get my first baseball glove until I was in my teens, and it was a hand-me-down from my brother-in-law. But she was always like, and I think looking back on it, was it because she wanted me to get out and get some exercise, or because she wanted me to get out of her hair? Either way, she got me out of the house, and so I ran around and I played kick the can, and I played stickball and things like that. And so I've always been physical, and I've been a physical person. I would consider myself a fidgeter. Like I can sit and watch a movie an interesting movie for a couple of hours, but I don't sit for long periods of time. I get antsy. I talk with my hand. And so I have been a physical person since I can remember. So I don't even think about tying my shoes. I don't even think about how I walk with good posture because it's just ingrained. But there are many people out there who didn't learn that or who have forgotten that, right?
Yeah.
Who sit for long periods of time. And so their bodies are used to being still. Their bodies are used to being stiff. And then one day when you try to reach up to the cabinet to get whatever, or they try to put groceries in the bottom of the refrigerator and they can't get down on the floor, or they can get down on the floor, but now they need help getting back up. That's when the light bulb goes off that, oops, maybe I should have been more active at a younger age. But as we say, it's never too late. I like to tell my clients it's never too late, but you don't have forever. And the sooner you get started, the better off you're going to be as you get into your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah, that's awesome. During the 35 years you've been in the fitness and health industry, what have you noticed is the biggest change?
I think the biggest change is the fitness industry is starting to recognize, and I think this was highlighted during the pandemic, that to be healthy, you want to look at the whole person, right? From a holistic standpoint. So when I first started in this business, there were, markers, how flexible you were, how strong you were, how much muscular endurance you had, how much cardiovascular endurance you had, right? Diet. Now, when you look at the markers that we look at, it's not only how flexible you are, how strong you are, how much muscular endurance you have, your cardiovascular health, what's your stress level, right? And I think that was highlighted during the pandemic. What's your ability to interact with other human beings, your social connections, right? We discovered, especially for the over 50 population, how important that was. Because during the pandemic, we were all isolated. We had to stay at home. You didn't have those social connections. It became very isolated, or isolating. And for me, as a in-person health coach, personal trainer, I was seeing 95% of my clients in person. When the pandemic hit here in New York City, which was the epicenter, I don't know if you remember, in early 2020, we were losing thousands of people a day, I had to shut down my business. And so I had to go fully virtual. And it was a learning process for me because I didn't have a lot of experience with the virtual experience, but it was also, very, I didn't realize how important it was for me to connect with people face to face. And once that was taken away, it was something, it was hard to deal with because I felt like not only was I isolating myself, but I felt isolated from my clients, from family, from friends. And that was really, it was hard to deal with.
How did your clients adjust to going from in person to virtual?
Well, as I said earlier, because I've established long-term relationships with my clients, their confidence in my abilities to continue to take care of them and keep them healthy and well and strong, even in a virtual environment, in a virtual world, was what saved my business, but also helped me help them. And so we jumped into the virtual world together. And I'm very thankful that they had that confidence in my abilities to help them continue to be strong. I'm now just recently started seeing people in person again, but many of my clients, I'd say about 70% of them, followed me into the virtual world, and we continued to. Some have continued to stay virtual because it's just more convenient for them and they really enjoy it. And some are now back in person.
So when you were with your clients before the pandemic in person, were there exercise machines and weight machines and weights that they were using? And then when you switched to virtual, how did you work into the physical fitness if they didn't have those equipment to use?
The good thing about working with the over 50 population is they don't need lots of weight, right? Most of my clients aren't looking to bulk up to build massive amounts of muscle. They want to stay healthy, they want to stay strong, they want to stay mobile. And so it wasn't as hard as you would think. What I did was, when I realized that the pandemic was probably going to last longer than everybody was telling us, at the time I was working with two doctors who were like, this pandemic is going to last longer than we expect. So be ready. I just sat down and I said, what are the movements, right, that my clients need to maintain, even inside an enclosed environment, their apartments, their offices, or whatever the case may be. And so I picked, equipment that they could buy easily, like on Amazon or on one of the fitness websites, that would add resistance to those movements. So, ankle weights, light weights, dumbbells, and bands. And so we were able to put together sort of a little exercise equipment setup that would continue to keep them healthy and strong. We could add resistance as they got stronger, right? More bands, heavier weights. There was a period there where it was very hard to get dumbbells. And so, we would use gallon jugs of milk and just fill them with water, right? And we would use that as resistance. And we do a lot of body weight workouts, squats, split squats, push-ups, and things like that.
Based on what you're saying, my understanding is a person who, say, is 50 and older does not need to go to a gym per se or a fitness center because they can do it at their home with the proper training that you give. Absolutely.
Yes. It's not necessary to be a member of a gym, to have access to heavy equipment. If you're creative, right, and you understand the clients that you're working with, I will pat myself on the back that I'm a good assessor. I like to analyze, and so I can look at somebody even virtually and say, okay, this is their movement pattern. This is where they're stiff. This is where they're weak. This is where they're flexible. This is where they need more flexibility, and then design a workout program for them based upon what I see. And then we take it from there. One of my heroes, I started 35 years ago at Bally's Jack LaLanne. So Jack LaLanne is one of my heroes. And if you know anything about Jack LaLanne, he was all about bodyweight workouts and bands. I mean, some of the most famous pictures you see of Jack LaLanne, and he's got bands and he's pulling them apart. He's doing split squats with his wife, Elaine. And they're using each other as resistance, right? And so bodyweight workouts and your ability to use your body as a resistance, right, has been around for, decades. And so if you're creative about it and you know how to stack exercises on top of each other to make them more, intense and comprehensive, then it's not really that hard to work out at home without any major equipment.
I agree with you. Jack LaLanne's one of my idols and heroes too, that I look up to. I would respectfully disagree about the body weight and movement being around for decades. I would say it's been around for centuries. The reason I say that is I was curious and did some research on what Roman soldiers would do to train.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting, it was they would have to carry 20 pounds of weight on their back, with a backpack or some form of carrying the weight,
mm-hmm.
and be able to walk 20 miles in a certain amount of time. And that was their initial training.
Right, sure.
And again, I advocate, and I'm sure you do too, that walking is one of the most underrated physical activities people can do.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, people remain too sedentary because they're watching TV, sitting, playing cards, reading books, whatever, as opposed to just getting up and walking.
Yes, exactly. Right. One of the things that I try to do with all of my clients is we work on what's practical, what's possible, and then what's productive. And what I mean by that is all of my clients are very busy individuals. They have families, they have children, they have businesses. And so their time is very limited, which you find for most people, right? One of the excuses that people make, or the reasons that people come up with for not exercising is because they don't have the time, right? So you can't produce any more time, right? There is no more time. You can't make more time. As far as I know, nobody has discovered a time machine that will reduce or reverse time. And so you have to fit, the important part is how do you fit exercise into somebody who's very busy, right? So I start with the practical. And I ask them, if it were a perfect world, how many times a week do you think you could work out? And usually the answer is 3 times a week and, for an hour. And then I ask them, okay, we don't live in a perfect world. In your world, what's possible? And oftentimes that number gets reduced. Twice a week, I can do a half hour. And then how can we make that twice a week, for a half hour, the most productive? And oftentimes, and this just happened this past week, with one of my other clients, who started out once a week. Now she wants to do 3 times a week because she's making progress. Oftentimes, once you start to see the results of a consistent workout program, even if it's once a week, twice a week, oftentimes that leads to more motivation, which means that I want to do more because I see the benefit and I feel the benefit of how I am acting, how much energy I have, how much better I feel. I can get out of bed without back pain, right? I can tie my shoes, that kind of thing. I'm more attractive to my spouse. All of those things, they start to add up. They start to build upon each other. And you see that's how people continue over a long period of time to continue to exercise and stay healthy and well.
That's interesting. I have a little sign in front of my computer here that says, attitude is everything.
Mm-hmm.
The older I get, the healthier I become. The healthier I become, the more motivated I am to be healthier. And my philosophy is I'm growing younger as I get older. And so
that's great.
That's what you were saying, is that people become more motivated as they see the results, and then it keeps going. And I think that's important for people. And the other thing you said is to be consistent as opposed to being perfect.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think people view motivation in an incorrect way. From my experience over the 35 years, the motivation comes after the doing, right? So you have a desire, right? I want to lose 30 pounds. That's your desire, right? And then you put together a plan and you start working towards that plan. When you start to see the results, that's when the motivation kicks in. People are always looking for motivation, but the motivation comes from the doing. So whenever I encounter a client who's starting to lose their motivation or starting to wonder, how do I get motivated or how do I stay motivated? The one thing that I always do is we go back to the why. Why did you start? What made you decide that you were going to start taking better care of yourself? Because that's a bottomless well. I call it the well of motivation. Right? You can always go back to your why. Right? My why was I want to lose 30 pounds. If you reached your goal, right? Well, then the goal becomes, I want to maintain that weight loss. That's your why, right? And so oftentimes, because this is not easy, right? It's hard work. That's the reason why it's called working out, right? So it takes time, it takes effort, and oftentimes it takes an investment, whether you're working with a personal trainer, or whether you're working with a health coach, or you have to buy equipment, or you have a gym membership. And so all of these things have value. And if you want to continue to extract the value from your investment, then you go back to your why. What's my why? That's going to be your motivating factor. To go back to my client, right? He started with, my why was, I want to be able to tie my shoes. That why turned into, I want to be able to get in and out of the bath without any assistance. That why turned into, I want to be able to get down on the floor to play with my 2-year-old. To play with my 2-year-old granddaughter. So, the why can change, but you want to always go back to when you start to lose your motivation, or when life gets, especially nowadays, when your life gets overwhelming and you're being pulled in multiple directions, you want to make sure that the way you prioritize your health and well-being, especially when there are other people who rely on you, whether it's family, a spouse, a team at work, co-workers, go back to your why, because that will always be there.
Yeah, I agree that it's important to always remember the why.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, why can change from one thing to another. I think of more of, instead of the motivation, I look at motivation as the reason people get started. I look at momentum as the reason they continue,
mm-hmm.
and to keep the momentum going.
Right.
And that's an example I use is the rocket ship. It takes a lot of thrust to blast off, and it goes slow until it gets in space and increases momentum. Or a locomotive.
Mm-hmm.
You could put a block of wood in front of the locomotive when it's standing still, and it won't move. And until it gets going, it won't move. However, once it's going, it can go through concrete like it's crepe paper,
right?
Because of the speed. And so that's where I think you and I agree that we want to get clients to be at a place where they want to keep their momentum going.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's going to make the difference, especially later in life, into your 60s, 70s, and 80s, on how your health span aligns with your lifespan, right? So we know that at around the age of 60, that's when these major diseases start to creep up. Right? Cancer, heart disease in men a little bit younger, but a little bit later in women, diabetes, arthritis, back pain, starts to creep up for all of us, unless you've been taking care of yourself. But the way that you can continue to be healthy and well and be productive into your 60s and 70s is to make sure that you've been consistent over a long period of time. And consistency is the number one thing that I tell everybody. If you had to pick one thing, what makes the difference between those who are healthy and well in their later years versus those who aren't, is consistency.
Just out of curiosity, how do you relate food and diet to the increase in disease that we see in people 50 and above?
Well, I think there's a definite correlation between the things that we put in our mouths and the diseases that tend to creep up as we get older. Right? when you think back, not much has really changed. There are people who have come up with newfangled ways of doing things, right? But in terms of exercise as well as diet and the foods that we eat, these rules, or guidelines, I should say, not rules. These guidelines have been around for, as you said, centuries, right? You eat, high quality protein. Lots of fruits and vegetables. Be careful with high processed foods, high fat foods, sweets. It's not, as I say to all my clients, it's not rocket science, right? And so, since I'm not a dietitian, a nutritionist, or a doctor, I don't give my clients diets, but I do give them guidelines. And one of the things that has been extremely beneficial, not only to them, but to me, especially in understanding their relationship to food, is I get them, and oftentimes they don't share the exact details with me, but I get them to write down the things that they're eating that contain calories. Because like they say in business, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. If you don't know exactly what you're putting in your mouth, right? Then you can't make the changes that are needed, especially if you're trying to lose weight and trying to be healthier. And oftentimes when you get your clients to write things down, there are light bulbs that go off in their heads, and they're like, well, I didn't realize I was eating this much, or I didn't realize I was eating this much candy. Now, it's almost like paying your taxes, right? You have to trust that the person is being honest, right? But once you have that information, then it's easy to help them make better choices.
Yeah, I agree with you. I find it interesting because based on the research I've done and my understanding is if you're over age 50, there's an 80% probability you're a type 2 diabetic or type pre-diabetic. And if you're pre-diabetic, what it means is if you don't adjust or change your eating habits and lifestyle, you'll be a full-blown type 2 diabetic within 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
What I also have noticed is that high fructose corn syrup was introduced in 1977. And now it's in everything, and they give it different names to hide it from people. Aspartame, the artificial sweetener used in sodas, for diet sodas and diet products,
Mm-hmm.
was introduced into the food in the 1980s. Olean, which was formerly Olestra, was again a drug, and then Procter and Gamble realized they can use as a fat reducer in food,
Mm-hmm.
introduced in the 1980s. That's when the obesity crisis started to take off. Mm-hmm. And what I tell clients, it's not the food we're eating, it's what they've done to the food.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know what the timeline, I don't know if this is exactly the timeline, but if my memory suits me well, that was around the time that fat became the mortal enemy.
Yeah.
Don't eat fat because it's going to make you fat. And a good example of this is prior to Snackwells coming onto the market, I think Fig Newtons and Chips Ahoy were the number one and two cookies. And then Snackwells came on the market, right? And Snackwells was no fat, right? So people thought, oh, I can eat as many Snackwells as I want because they don't contain any fat, but they were loaded with sugar. Okay? And so people were just eating low fat but high sugar, whether it was corn syrup or just naturally, just eating a tremendous amount of sugar. And I think that added, it wasn't a major contributor to the obesity epidemic. I remember one client who came to me. He wanted to lose weight. He was in the entertainment industry, and so he went to a lot of entertainment events, and he wanted to look good, right? And so one of the things that I had him do was I had him write down everything that he was eating and drinking. And one of the things that he was drinking was Snapple. And he was drinking about 2 to 3 Snapples a day. On the label, it said, made from all natural ingredients, right? And so he thought he was drinking something, right? But each Snapple is 16 ounces, which is 2 servings. So on average, he was drinking 4 to 6 Snapples a day. You know, I don't remember what the math was, but I think each serving was 150 calories. So 900 calories, empty calories of sugar. Now, yeah, it was pure sugar if you believe what was on the label, but it was still sugar. And so we cut that out, and he wanted to lose 15 pounds. He lost the 15 pounds. You know, as they say, you can't outwork out a bad diet. Right. And so it's got to be a combination of diet and exercise. And as we now know, you know, one of the contributing factors to people being less healthy is our external environment and our internal environment. So how much stress are you having to deal with, and how do you deal with that stress? You know, what's the toxicity that you're surrounded by? And then how are you recovering from all of that? And stress and sleep would be the big one, right? So you're getting enough sleep so you can recover, rejuvenate, and start the next day in a better place than you ended the day before.
Yeah. I blame Starbucks on a lot of obesity because some of their drinks will contain 50 to 75 grams of sugar.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And some people will have 2 or 3 Starbucks a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My understanding is if you're a male, you should have no more than 30 grams of sugar a day. And if you're a female, no more than 25 grams of sugar a day. So imagine one Starbucks drink has twice as much, 3 times as much sugar in one of their drinks than you need for the entire day.
Yeah.
And not to mention the other stuff people eat. And then again, energy drinks, the Red Bull, the Monsters.
Oh my goodness.
Not around when we were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It was coffee that you would drink.
Yeah.
Get your energy.
What's that little bottle that's called 5-Hour Energy? It comes in a little bottle. And I think it's like, you know, a double shot of espresso, you know?
So, yeah, I actually met a person, professional volleyball player. And at age 21 or 22, had a heart attack.
Mm.
And he thought, what's going on? I'm a professional athlete. Turns out he was drinking 3 or 4 Red Bulls.
Yeah.
That was the cause.
Yeah, those things are dangerous.
Yeah, so that's why I tell people, you know, if you want to live longer and healthier, read the ingredients that you're consuming and ingesting in your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's 50 and above who wants to start a health journey or get into wellness?
Well, my first, if you have no experience at all, I would probably hire someone to get you started. Right? Whether you continue to work with that person's up to you if you establish a good relationship. But if I had to pick one thing that would give you immediate results, is just make sure you're getting enough sleep.
Awesome. And then how can people reach out to you if they want to work with you?
Well, I think you have my email address. So anybody can, if they email me and then put in the subject line, reverse aging, then I'll know that they came through this interview with you. And I'm offering 30-minute consultations, so it won't cost you anything. We'll just have a nice conversation. I can give you some tips, to get you started.
Awesome. Yeah, I have the email address. Can I give that over there?
Absolutely.
So it's c3r dot ps.biz@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll repeat that so that the audience has it again. And it's C as in Charlie, 3, R as in Robert, dot, P as in Paul, S as in Sam, dot, B as in boy, I as in Idaho, Z as in zebra at gmail.com.
That's it.
Awesome. And I appreciate so much that you're willing to give a free 30-minute consultation to people so they can start their health and wellness journey. And as you said, it's never too late until you're 6 feet under or cremated.
Right.
Awesome. Anything else you'd like to share with the audience or add?
No, I don't think so. What I would encourage everyone is just take that first step. Put one foot in front of the other. Don't become overwhelmed by all of the strategies, techniques, all of the different people who are telling you do it this way, do it that way. Sort of assess, body scan. What do I need right now? Do I have back pain? Well, that's what you want to address first. Do I need more energy? Or you address that. Am I getting enough sleep? And you address that. You start there, right? And once you start with that, it's about stacking habits on top of habits, which create a foundation. And that, as you said earlier, will give you the momentum and the motivation to continue.
Yeah, I find that interesting because I usually ask people, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time.
One bite, that's right.
And then the other thing I think of is the example of 10 blind men put in different positions on an elephant and said, how do you describe it?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on where they're located, they give different descriptions of the same elephant. And so that's what you're saying is figure out where you're at and then address that area.
Yes, that's right.
The next area.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carlos. I appreciate your being a guest today. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. And I'm sure our audience will too.
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for inviting me.